Are you online comparing yourself to what feels like every other person in the world? Do you struggle with fear of imperfection or social anxieties? Us too! Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reigeter, and today I'm joined by Hamza Islam, host of the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. In this episode, we unpack the pressures of perfection and social comparison, explore the impact of intrusive thoughts, and discuss how embracing vulnerability can help us break free. Join us for a candid conversation on mental health, self-acceptance, and challenging the idea of perfection. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Kind of nervous these past couple of days because I'm getting ready to go back to college. I attend Ohio State University, so it's a weird feeling to go back. It's been 3 months since spring semester, so kind of nervous because it's my last year, but also excited and hopefully I can end on a positive note as I get ready to graduate.
Okay, wait, I'm feeling the exact same way. I get ready to start school in just under a month now. I've been off since first week of June. So wait, June, July, August, so almost 2 months. And I don't know my month. So this is going great for me today. And I'm so anxious because I start my practicum, which is like the internship. I get to practice being a therapist, and I'm so excited. But what if I don't know what to say? And I love to talk. I'm clearly such a talker. But what if I suddenly don't have the words? I am so stressed and overwhelmed and excited, and I want to like graduate with that 4.0, and I feel so close yet so scared that it's all going to be over. Like, going back to school is stressful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, 4.0 is unfortunately not something I'm going to get, but it's definitely one of those things where I think it's so easy to be afraid or so easy to be scared because you think the worst things can happen. So it really is. I mean, I think a lot of things that we do, I mean, obviously there's the physical aspect, but I also think that everything that you do is more about the mental aspect and like what you tell yourself because if you do tell like if you I've a lot of people have told me about this, but like if you say bad things about yourself or you keep repeating these things, then more likely than not, the worst things that you think are going to happen may end up happening. So just trying to get in the positive mindset and trying to tell myself that at the end of the day, you know, I got this, I'm going to do great. And whatever challenge comes my way, I'm going to overcome them.
Oh, I love that. It's that self-fulfilling prophecy though, right? Like you tell yourself you're gonna fail and then you're so focused on failing that you don't study enough. And then you fail and you're like, see, I knew it. But it was really starting with that mindset. That's my biggest fear. And I convince myself every day, every exam, every paper, every assignment, every class that I'm gonna fail and the world is gonna end. It's so hard because there's so much pressure. There's all this pressure to be perfect. And I think school is that one setting where in life, you fail, you make a mistake, you learn, and that's part of life, and that's what you're supposed to do, right? But in school, the entire goal is to make no mistakes, right? That's to get an A, that means you basically made no mistakes, and you need to make mistakes to learn. So it's this like constant fear of not being perfect all the time. And then transitioning into life where suddenly you're allowed to make mistakes, but you have to let go of this fear of never making a mistake. Do you
For
feel
sure. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And it's weird because in school we're taught, like you said, we're taught like, you know, you should learn from your mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And then we have a grading scale that almost punishes you for making
yeah,
mistakes. So it's like, wait, okay, hold on. I've always been taught that school should be you're there to learn. But I recently had a discussion on my podcast, Oh My Curry Goodness, where it's like it almost feels like for me growing up, I didn't learn for the experience. I learned for the grade. So like if we take history, for example, I mean, people say history is useless. That's a whole other conversation. I think it's useless. I think it's actually valuable. But for me, at the time, I don't know that I can't name the 26, 27 amendments of the US Constitution. Maybe back then, because I was like, I need to remember this to get an A. But now, I mean, there's freedom of speech, there's right to bear arms. Off the top of my head, I don't know. So I feel like when in school, obviously there's more, but I'm just overthinking another thing about me, which is the fact that it almost feels like we're doing things for the grade rather than for the experience. And I think, especially in college, where it's like you want to apply as much as you can, but if you don't get the grades possible, then you're not gonna have any opportunities. So it's like, how do I try to become the best outside and inside the classroom? It's a weird balance, and I just wish that people could make school fun again, which I know that kind of sounds childish, but I mean, in a weird way, you're limit. I mean, I think children have a weird sense of creativity, and why not get that creative side out of you, regardless of what field you're pursuing?
I agree. It's making school exciting again. If you're excited to learn, if you want to be there because it's fun and it's exciting and you get to learn something instead of it feeling like, oh, I have to sit here and I have to worry about taking these tests and hearing everything the teacher says and writing everything down and feeling completely overwhelmed and then not remembering anything as soon as the test is done. It's the whole point is to learn and it's to learn how to learn, right? It's supposed to be fun. You're discovering who you are in different ways. You're discovering, I mean, as a child, how you like to express yourself, right? In art class and how you learn math, right? You can kind of understand your brain a little differently, what you like about science, what draws you in, all these things that you find fascinating and important. The heart of who you are and who you grow to be should be celebrated. It should be something that there's no wrong way to learn. It's just finding what works for you. And instead, it's gone so far away from learning in the sense of learning who you are and learning material to pass the test so that you don't fail, so that you can continue to learn to pass the test, so that you don't fail, so you can continue doing that. And hopefully at the end, someone will hire you to make enough money to pay back all that student loans and debt that you went through to be able to get a job. I don't, this is why I feel so stressed going back to school, right? Cycle of why am I doing this? Am I learning enough? And is it going to make sense when I come out with all this loan? Did I get what I wanted out of it or did I memorize for a test and it's all gone now?
Absolutely. And I think what makes sometimes, and what can make it worse is like when people, I don't know if this kind of connects with what you were saying, but I also feel like because we were talking about getting the best grades possible and getting the best opportunities possible, there's also the fact that we have things out of our control, like other parents and friends who like to compare their kid to yours. So it almost feels like you're like a Pokemon card where it's like, oh, you have this, I have this. And then I am of someone of South Asian descent. So we love comparing our kids. So it's like now it feels like now as parents, or maybe even our like myself, now we're being seen as Pokemon cards. We're like, okay, here's our greatest strengths, here's our weakness, here's what I have, here's what this person has, and it makes school even more anxious, and also can weird way tear friendships apart because now it's like we need to compare based on what we have, and whatever weakness one person has, let's exploit that based on a strength that people have. And it's like there's again like there's the in school part and then there's the out of school part, which is like how like the community that you grew up in. And so obviously I'm kind of talking about it from my perspective, but I'm sure maybe if this is something you experienced with Francesca, like that comparison part or the feeling of like, well, this person accomplished this, I haven't yet. And well, yeah, more often than not. I was gonna say like maybe there's something you've accomplished that other people haven't. I don't know if that's something you might worry about, but like, the fact when like
Compare the
someone has
good.
something that you don't, you're just like, oh no, like I gotta do everything. So it is stressful, but I hope that I don't have to worry about that, although that's gonna be a process.
It's so silly to me that this is how we're raised, right? Being compared to everyone around us. And then people wonder why we're constantly comparing ourselves, right? Why we're wondering other people are my age is buying a house and I'm still in school. What's wrong with me? Right? Everyone else is getting married and I'm not. What's wrong with me? But we were taught to compare ourselves from the age of 5 when we took our first spelling test. Like that was the first day they decided to start comparing us. Or no, honestly, when you're a baby and when you learn to talk and walk and I don't know, but all these things were constantly being compared against what is the norm. And it's told to us as we get older. In the beginning, it's not really told to us because no one's telling a baby you're not able to walk yet. What's wrong with you? But then why are you not coloring in the lines? Look, they're coloring in the lines. Why can't you do that? Right? Or they got 100 on their spelling test. Why did you spell that word wrong? Right? These subtle messages that we start of kids making them compare themselves. And then we become adults and we're like, oh my God, everyone around us is so much better than us. What's wrong with me? Over and over again. But it was taught to us. That was literally what was taught to us. And they're like,
Yeah,
you put it in my head.
it's like
Oh,
your fault. Your fault. And I think that kind of ties in, and and I feel like the one thing that maybe people don't understand enough, and I mean, like, I think this is why I created my own podcast, is that I read somewhere where it's like, it's such a weird thing because we're so involved in comparison that we end up comparing our behind the scenes to someone's final product. And now we're like, because we don't compare, like if I'm looking at Francesca, right? We shouldn't, it's like, okay, I'm comparing, or someone is comparing my behind the scenes to someone's final destination. But in reality, it should be comparing both of our behind the scenes, because it's not like they had it all figured out. It was a process. And unfortunately, unless we understand that everyone has a journey and not comparing a journey with the destination, we're going to continue, like, I forget, I mean, for lack of a better term, destroying people because we don't understand that everyone else has a personal story. It's not like you got to the end goal because you were just born smart, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And like moving from comparing journeys to celebrating the difference in our journeys, because the difference in our journeys is what brings us to these different destinations. It what makes us us. It's what makes us special and unique. It helps us give whatever gift that we have to the world. And we're so focused on comparison. And I know I do it all the time. I'm like, why do they have it figured out? And I don't even know what I'm supposed to do anymore. I had this whole breakdown to my 90-year-old neighbor yesterday. I was like, being in your 20s is so hard. Everyone gets different places in their lives. And you're like, why am I not there? Why am I not constantly? I'm like online, offline. It's just all of this. Why don't I know what I'm doing yet? And it's so hard because it's this constant comparison of how did you get there quicker than I did? Why am I not on that track? And instead, you're celebrating that they found someone to share the rest of their life with, and they're so happy. And I found that I love my work, and right now my main commitment is my nonprofit and getting to grow that and see where that goes. It doesn't make one of our lives better or more special or important than the other. It's just celebrating that we're at different stages, and that's normal because no two people's journeys should be alike. Hopefully,
Yeah.
because it should be following what we want and not what society or our family or someone else has laid out in front of us.
Yeah, and it's difficult, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like there is a pressure that maybe our generation and maybe future generations, I hope we can change that. And it's difficult because maybe it's no fault of the parents, it's that because maybe they were grown up and they grew up with that idea. So I do hope that at some point we can try to like limit that so that we can all be appreciative of other people rather than kind of like, it's kind of like that weird, it's that meme, I forget the meme, but it's like there's a mask where you're happy, but inside that mask you're like, oh gosh, I hate this. Like, I wish we can like limit that or eliminate it, because we're not here to tear each other apart. We're here to bring people up because, like you said, everyone has a unique journey. It's not like two people are the same person. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just societal standards that have kind of put us all in this boat. And I hope, I mean, with social media, sometimes I worry that it exaggerates that because you're constantly online comparing. I'm not everybody maybe, but I'm constantly online comparing every single aspect of myself to everyone around me. And that's why I started kind of everyone makes fun of me for it that knows me personally in my life. They're like, I saw you post a picture of you crying again on your story. And I'm like, that is what I'm going through. And I hate opening social media and seeing everyone smiling all the time and never showing the hard part. So I was like, my follower count got a little higher, and I was like, okay, people are constantly commenting, messaging me, like, I don't know how you do it. You're so great. I wish I could do that. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing this with any grace at all. There's so many tears behind the scenes that no one sees, and so many like cognitive distortions. I'm like, we have to start showing it. Even if not everyone needs to post them crying, but just being honest that even honest in a conversation, like, Mrs. How are you? I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not always great, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's like that common saying, right? It's okay to not be okay. And I get that not everyone will be accepting that phrase, but it's okay. And if, I mean, I don't know, I would never post myself crying. I feel like that's,
It's just a me thing.
I would say if there is one thing that I will add or allude to is the fact that I don't want to just see happy times. Now, I'm not advocating for like evilness. That's not what I'm saying, but it's more like I want you to like be okay talking about like the good and bad experiences because the good part is one half. And because of social media, it's so easy to gravitate towards positivity. But it's like, let's talk about that because like social media shows one side of a person, but let's show the other side. And I guess for other people, maybe that will take a journey because not everyone is ready to share the difficult experiences. I mean, we do have to like follow the ethics of human beings. But at some point, let's be like, okay, look, this is one side of me, but I want to show the other side of me because there are people that follow me or that people that are connected with me. And it'd be nice for them to share a little bit about me. So it's okay to be you. And if people start unfollowing, then that's that's their problem. They don't want to respect or celebrate it, and that's okay. So I guess it sucks with social media, but I mean, you're using your platform for a reason, and who's stopping you from doing the things that you really want to share or post about?
Yeah, and I think just normalizing vulnerability as being acceptable in a way. There's just so much focus on my highlight reel and being happy and look at all the things I did. And I mean, that's all great to share, and I hope everyone gets to share that. But then also acknowledging, even if it's offline, just with your loved ones, with your friends, that, some days it's not as great as social media makes it seem, and that's okay. Just not to feel like you have to put that face on all the time. If you want to put that face on online, go for it. That's who you are and that's who you want to be, and that makes you feel great and you feel connected to that. I love posting the good stuff. It's one of my favorite things to do. It makes me feel really happy when I get to post the good stuff. And just finding where you can be vulnerable. Because maybe it's not online. Maybe it's just at home with your dog, right? But finding that space where you allow yourself to be vulnerable instead of feeling weak or bad for being vulnerable. And I think that's the shift I really, really hope we see more and more with our generation.
Yeah, couldn't agree anymore. And it's weird because like I mean, sometimes there is a issue where you don't know how to be vulnerable. And like vulnerability isn't just like sharing everything about you. Like if someone is sharing their social security, that's not vulnerability, that's creepy. But I would say that like I mean, it is hard because like when you are sharing people like your personal story and maybe a side that other people may not have done, then people are might thinking like, okay, what are you really doing this for? Are you really doing this for because of a purpose or like is there a catch? And then sometimes, like for me, I didn't grow up with that many difficulties or challenges other than getting the best grades possible. So for me, like when I do my podcast, it's weird, or when I talk about myself, it's a bit weird because I'm like, well, the only challenges I had growing up were grades. And then in college, the fear of talking to people. So like those are the only two things that I really grew up worrying about. But then you see other people and they talked about challenges with mental health or they had struggled, like maybe they were dealing with poverty or homelessness. I'm trying to think. Maybe they moved around a lot throughout, and so like the idea of community and home maybe may not be the same compared to someone like myself who grew up in one city, Columbus, Ohio. So everyone has a different story, and so like sometimes it's like as someone who maybe didn't go through that many challenges, it's like do I have my place in the field of vulnerability? So it's a challenge, but I try to like, that's why I feel like right now I'm trying to like share my story and try to experience things. And I hope with my podcast, I'd love to like embrace the positive side of sharing the importance of vulnerability while also being okay going through small obstacles like failure, like, oh, this, nope, we're not going to support this. Or, I mean, you usually don't have it because you're a great interviewer, but for me, sometimes there'll be days where I'm like, maybe I wasn't the best host. So I don't know. I feel like with this podcast, I'm like opening a book about my journey, and I hope that as I continue on, I can be able to share more experiences where I'm like, hey, while I was doing this podcast, I went through A, B, C, or X, Y, and Z.
I mean, first, I want to say that any experience you've had that felt challenging to you or difficult to you, that impacted you, is so valid. And it's not any less than anyone else's because it's all about how it impacted you. And I think that a lot of people feel like they can't talk about it because they're like, well, other people have had it worse. And then kind of minimizing and invalidating and gaslighting themselves so that they don't get to have a voice. So I want you to know that you have a voice and you're allowed to share it. And you should share it because a lot of people also go through that. The comparison game is something that I go through every single day of my life, and I wish if I could make it stop, I would. I wish I could do it. I've used any possible cognitive restructuring tool or framing tool. I wish I could fix it. I'm working on it. But these are things people deal with, and they're important conversations to be held. And fear of talking to people is a huge thing. I went through a phase where I was absolutely terrified to talk to anyone because I thought everyone was gonna hate me, and I still I my 90-year-old neighbor again yesterday, I'm like, "I'm convinced everyone hates me," and she's like, "Francesca, breathe, breathe. Figure out why you feel that way. What insecurities do you have?" And she's like, "And I'll tell you you're great." Like, "Okay, let's do it." But it's about finding what works for you and sharing how it impacted you because so many people are going through it. And it may be an important part of so many people's journeys. I think we should always talk about it. And then also with the podcasting, I can't tell you, and speaking, that's a big thing. I'm like convinced that I was terrible all the time. And sometimes I just have to remind myself that it's about your experience, it's about my experience, and hopefully we created some kind of conversation that one person out there can resonate with and grow and learn something from and take away from it. But it is really hard. It's that comparison. It's that wanting to be good enough. It's that fear of not being perfect that makes so many people, whether or not you're experiencing a mental health condition, whether or not you're facing a severe challenge in your life right now or a big obstacle, these are things all can resonate with. And conversations need to be held so people know that they're not alone in this comparison game because it feels so isolating.
Yeah, and first of all, one thing I want to talk about the podcast part, but like I love the example you used with your neighbor telling you, okay, say why you're scared of this, and I'm going to tell you that you're great. And it's really weird because when it comes to conversations with people, like I don't know exactly what makes a good friend because when I look at my little brother, who I'm 7 years older than, he is able to talk to his friends every day. Meanwhile, I look at my whether it's emailing or text messages, and I'm like, can I call this person? Can I talk to this person? What if I become a burden on them? I think one thing that you said on my podcast was like, do not ever give me your phone number because I'm going to be asking you 1,000 questions. And so I was like, in my mind, I have to be really careful asking people, like whether it's hanging out or talking, whatever that may be, because there are days where, and I'm sure you might face this as well, where you're like you just want to talk to someone, but then there's that question of who do I talk to. So I have this weird idea where it's like I'm gonna start treating books the way most people treat friends, and then treat friends the way most people treat books, in the sense that like I'm gonna spend time with my books because books won't really judge you. It's not like you read a book and it's like, stop reading me. It's like you having a conversation with an author. And then friends, it's more like you're there, but I don't want to spend time with you, not because I don't want to talk to you, but because I don't want to be a burden on you. So I do that with a lot of people I interact with because I think the scariest part is like, I always feel like I am one conversation away from losing a friend. And most, like 99.9% of the time, I'm trying to do something that like most people would do. Like, hey, I need your help with this, or hey, I want to hang out with you because I think you're a great person. Not in like the most violent, or not even 99.9%. Like 100% of the time, I will never like berate people or like do anything that's like extremely mean. It's more like I want to reach out to you, but I apparently reached out at the worst possible time, and now we no longer communicate. So my concept of friendship is really weird. And I know that people said like, don't worry about it. We'll always talk, or we can always reach out. But I'm like, I feel like we're one conversation away from messing that up. So I don't know. Friendships are complicated.
Friendships are really complicated, and I texted my friend the other day, and I was like, "Hey, um, I feel like you're mad at me, but I don't know if it's in my head to like do something. I feel like our conversations are more distant." And she was like, "Please don't take it personally. I'm just stressed, so I'm not having as much of like a fun conversation, but you're good. You didn't do anything wrong." And I was like, "Thanks, I needed the reassurance because I was going down the rabbit hole." And I've learned to do that with my friends. I will literally text and be like, because I'll sit in my head and convince myself everyone's mad at me and everyone hates me. So now I will text people like, "Are you mad at me? This is how I feel." And it's in my head. And I want to make sure that it's just in my head and that I didn't do anything wrong instead of sitting there and ruminating by myself, crying in the corner, because I used to do that. And most people appreciate it because they're like, I'd rather you ask me than sit there and panic and feel alone in it. But my friends also know that I need that reassurance because I struggle with this, with severe negative thoughts. I struggle with feeling isolated all the time. So that's my new thing is I text people and I'm like, hey, I feel like we're more distant lately. I want to check in. Did I do anything wrong? Are you mad at me? Or is it in my head? And some of them, it's been received very well, I will say. So that's been very helpful.
No, I appreciate you saying that. There are many times I don't want to call you out, Francesca, but there are many times where I'm like, oh, I really want to talk to Francesca, but then I'm like, no, I'm good. I'll pass. I'll reach out another time. Yeah, and then I'll be like, that time comes in. Like, for example, I one time, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a class assignment or there was a college assignment, and then I wanted to use you as this for a presentation because I was like, oh, tell me about a nonprofit. And I was like, well, I just interviewed Francesca on my podcast. I think it would make sense. But then I was like, should I text you? Should I not? What if I become a burden? But then I went ahead and did it. And I think like in my mind, I'm like, Francesca's gonna like block me after this. But then what happened was you were very welcoming and you're like, yeah, you can definitely use my story. And I was like, phew. Okay, no more talking to Francesca. Just kidding.
Was I nice? I mean, really nice.
You were nice. You were nice. You were no, you were incredible. You were genuine. And then there are times where I'd love to like meet with you, or not like in person, because I'm not there yet, like in Florida, but like just to interact because you're obviously a really fun person to talk to. You love talking to people for hours. But there's also the fact that like you have your own life and you have your own things going on. So it's like, okay, I don't want to be a burden, or again, I don't want to have that one less because you are a fun person to talk to. A lot of the people that I've interacted with give me one or two word answers. So I'm like, okay, I know Francesca like loves talking, loves running her mouth, as she said on my podcast. But like I would rather talk to someone who talks too much than talks too little because those conversations are really, really weird.
Yeah, it's so difficult when someone only gives you like the short answers because it does cause those ruminating thoughts of why aren't they talking more? Am I bothering them? Do they not like the questions I'm asking? Do they not feel entertained by me? I'm so that person too. And you can reach out to me anytime. And if it's ever a bad time, I'm always the first one to say it. I'll be like, I might have done this to you, I think, that I was like, it might have been to you, that I was like, I'm out for a walk. I had a really bad day. Did I do that to you?
I think it was through email. I think it was through email,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I was like, I know we have a meeting and I'm happy to meet, but I had a really bad day and I really have to go on this walk. I am the first person to be so honest that I'm having a bad day and I need to do something. And I'd love to be here for you. And here's how I can be here for you. I am the first person to say it because that's what I want people to say to me. I don't want them to just cancel and not tell me why. I like to be completely honest all the time. Some people really appreciate it. Some people are like, okay, you didn't need to tell me that you're depressed again. Like, but what's happening? But I think it's so important for me personally to be super honest because I want to be there for people. I love talking so much. I love meeting with people. I love helping people. But at the same time, when I'm having those bad days, I it happens. Sometimes I can't, and I love to tell people why I can't, so they don't have those ruminating thoughts that I have. And maybe other people don't have those severe ruminating thoughts like I do. But if they do, they know that it's not them. It's literally me in that moment.
No, of course. I no, I appreciate you saying that. And like again, I guess like for me, like similar to what you were saying, I would be like, okay, what if Francesca is like lying, or what if she's like, yeah, I just don't want to hang out with you, and then you're like hanging out with your friends. Like I've experienced that. My friends have experienced that as well. So I'm like, what if it's that? But then I feel like as long as until you don't actually get to meet people and like see like what they experience, like what they're kind of experiencing, unless you don't have those conversations, it's so easy to come up with these like extreme conclusions. So yeah, it's a complicated thing. I want to ask you though. I know I'm not the host of your podcast, but I
Go
am
for it.
curious.
Take over.
As someone who has a podcast where you've interacted with so many people from across various backgrounds, do you feel like? Because I'll answer this question, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you feel like your podcast has been some sort of shield from the concerns of being seen as a burden, or that possibility of being like of maybe like ending friendships? Because podcasting is kind of professional. Like you meet with people, you may have contact with like assistants, PR managers, guests. So it's like you're there for a reason, but sometimes with friends, it's very easy to have those weird like negative thoughts where it's like maybe that person might be mad at me for something, and you're just kind of going down this rabbit hole. Do you feel like your podcast is a shield in some sense, or I guess tell me about that relationship?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that great question. Um, so yes and no, because I try my best to show up for everything the same. Like as if everyone's my friend. I tend to have that energy. I really like that I have that energy. And it just helps me connect with people more. So sometimes I do have these thoughts like, oh my goodness, was that email too harsh or was it too nice? They didn't answer me right away. They didn't reschedule. What did I do wrong? So I definitely wouldn't say that's a shield from any of that, but I do try to show up in the same way so that I don't have that kind of, so that it's consistent. The intrusive thoughts are consistent. I'm going to show up in the same way. And I try not to allow anything to guard me because I think what I like most about my podcast and about my work is how honest I am and how much of me you get to see in it. So I try to show up in the exact same way and then let those intrusive thoughts happen in the exact same way. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Oh, no, that answered it perfectly. And it's so weird. Like even like what I try to do, and I know you do this a lot because you obviously just said it, but with my podcast, I don't want to just be like I want the person to be part of like my little community. And so like whether it's PR managers or guests, like you're officially part of I used to call it Curryville because my podcast is called Oh My Curry Goodness. Unfortunately, I found out that Curryville is an actual city. It's actually located in Missouri, which is ridiculous, but okay. So, like, I always try to welcome people as friends, but then it's like, what if they don't want to see that? Like, a great example was that there was a PR manager that helped me get a professional soccer player that I'm a big fan of. And then I found out that she was in Ohio, where I'm based in. So I was like, I mean, she's a PR manager. I mean, I know it's a weird thing, but like, do you want to like, and then I texted her saying, do you want to like meet up? But unfortunately, like where she was is like very far away from where I am. So unfortunately, we couldn't meet. But I think at first I was like, it took me like 6 or 7 hours to make that to find the courage to ask because it's like there's a title with them, like they are a PR manager, and they're I don't want to call them old, but like they have more experience than us. So like there's that bit of gap. And so yeah, it's weird. Like the podcast, like I try to treat people as friends, but it's like do other people, especially PR managers, assistants, and guests, like do they want to see you as friends? Because when you meet them, they're kind of strange. They're your strangers, and then it's up to them as to like how much they will allow you into their life because every human being has its own differences.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's a big thing with me. I will message people who I feel like I had a good banter back and forth with and a good rapport. Like, hey, I'd love to connect again. If it's someone far, if you want to jump on a Zoom, like, let's reconnect, and catch up and stay in touch. And I will ask. And if it's someone that I'm in the same location with, like, I'd love to grab a cup of coffee with you. And people ignore me all the time. And then people will, to be honest, and then a lot of people will say yes and we'll keep in contact and it's great. And then they become in real life friends and not just podcast guests or PR managers or associates who I've done work with or collaborate with. They can become in real life friends. So if I feel like they had a good connection, I will totally do that. And it's really scary, but I something I like to say that my friends think is really hilarious and a bit annoying. It's I would love to be friends with me. I would love to experience what it's like to be friends with me. I'm like, you guys are so lucky. So I like if someone doesn't want to hang out with me, I'm sorry. I would love to hang out with me. And I think that's what I like about myself is that I enjoy who I am and I want people around me who enjoy who I am. But I really wish I could be friends with you. I think it would be really amazing.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious.
Two of me? Oh my goodness. I'd love that for the world. But it's so, I think it's important for us to learn that we are important and valued, even if someone's older than us or has more experience than us or a different title than us. Doesn't mean that they're better. We are all important. And if someone doesn't refer or doesn't want to connect with you, yeah, nothing to do with you because you're great.
I try to remind myself of that, but a lot of times I'm one of those people where it's like I need an oxygen mask before talking to that person, breathe, and then let's hope that nothing bad happens and then reach out. Sometimes like what I like to do is like I'll text them and then I'll turn off my phone. Cause like I'm like I know what the worst possible thing can happen. And then I open it up and I'm like, oh, I see their message. And then I check my heart rate. Great, it's 115 beats per minute. Let's look at the message. Oh, it's not bad. Phew. And so yeah, I don't know. Conversations are complicated, but I always try to remind myself, like the next time I'm about to reach out to someone for any specific reason, I'm like, okay, and it's something I've done. Like these are two helpful resources I've been using. The first one is, or helpful questions, excuse me. The first question is, what is my intention? My intention is, oh, I'm interested in meeting up with them because they happen to be in the same area, or maybe there's a specific reason. So number one is knowing your own intentions, which is really hard because people don't understand your intentions. They only see like the external part. Like unless we have some sort of technology that allows me to see Francesca's brain, which number one, I don't want that. And number two, I think that's a bit creepy.
Oh,
But
that's so great.
I don't want to be like, what is
I
Francesca
love it.
thinking? But like but because we don't know what like other people are thinking, it's really hard. But like number one, understanding your intentions because it helps you feel better, it helps you be at peace. And then the second thing is, okay, how have I felt this way before? And how did like how or have I had this same experience before? So now I'm like, okay, if I'm getting ready to meet so and so, or if I really want to meet with so and so, have I ever felt a situation where I was really nervous? Okay, basically 99.9% of the time. How often has the worst thing possibly happened?
Every
Very rarely. So now it's like, okay, you know what? I got this. And so these two questions have really helped me in helping become better at understanding that the worst possible thing, or like the fact that like everyone is a human being, like you said, or everyone is important. It helps you remember that. But I just need to remind myself that like I need to continue having that mindset because people are not as bad or as mean as you think they are just because of whatever they have. And yeah, there are a few bad apples, but there are a lot of good apples too. I say that because I just recently bought apples from a grocery store because my mom asked me them, so I could finally use that analogy.
It's so true. And one thing that I've noticed is I'm so caught up in my own mind all the time, and I'm convinced that the world is ending and no one around me likes me and nobody's having fun. And I'm like, they must be thinking this, but most people are feeling a little bit insecure. They're thinking about something else they've going on, and they're not thinking that they hate me 24/7. Maybe some people are. I'm so sorry if you do feel that way. I hope nobody does. But I'm sure people do. Sure. But they're probably not thinking what I'm thinking about me. They might be thinking the same thing about themselves. They might be thinking about work or something else they have going on. Or they might be just enjoying life in that moment, which I would love to do that. But it's so important to realize that everyone's thinking what we're thinking about us. And if we really work out. And that's why I text people and I ask them, do you hate me? Because this is how I feel. I'm way too honest sometimes with what I'm thinking and feeling, but it's the only thing that helps me get out of this constant fear of reaching out to people. And also another thing I do now is I think I posted this on my story last night. I always send thank yous, whether it's a text or I'll handwrite something. I rarely handwrite. Like it has to be something like really great that someone did for me. But if I go out with my friends, like, thank you so much for having dinner with me. I had so much fun. Can't wait for next time. And then they respond like, oh, I had so much fun. Can't wait. I'm like, there we go. They had fun. I had fun. So good. And if they ignore me, we won't go out again. And that's really sad. I will cry about it. Absolutely. And then I'll get over it. But I've learned that because I'm so afraid that everyone had a bad time or that I did something wrong, it's a constant fear that I have something I'm working on, but not something I've overcome yet. I will send that thank you message so they know I appreciated them and I get that reassurance back from them. And I'm all about that reassurance. It really helps.
I am so glad you brought that up because I am that same person too. I'll send a thank you message and I'll say, "Hey, thank you so much for like for whatever. You know, I really had time. I had a great time. Hope we can do this again." If a person responds in these two ways, either they don't respond after a period of time, or they like the message, because that's a thing on I think on iMessage. I'm not sure about other phones, but on iMessage you can like a message. If you do one of those two things, I'm nervous because I really want like that explicit message saying, "Hey, thank you so much. It was really great meeting with you too." Yada whatever, yada yada yada. Sorry, I watched Seinfeld, but like yada yada yada. You know, we got it. I love the explicit message. If someone just likes it or doesn't, or if someone likes my message or worse doesn't respond back, then I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking, Francesca. And so then I'm like, do I need to send them like a follow up message, or what if that means we're done? I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. I want that explicit message or that actual message saying, yeah, thank you. It's okay if they lie about it. They can just say, yeah, I had a
Exactly.
great time. Had a great time. No, I didn't. It's okay. At least I have that reassurance or false reassurance.
Yeah, but it feels good to feel like to kind of counter those thoughts in your mind and those doubts that you have. And a lot of people are so afraid of those thoughts that they have and they are afraid to talk about it. And I think that's been a great way for me to begin to talk about it, to get that reassurance, and because people love to feel important and they love when someone feels grateful. I love when someone says that to me. My friends love it when I say it to them. So I think it also just makes you feel good and making someone else happy. And if they, and when people just like heart my messages or thumbs up them, I'm like, wow, they either really, really just are super busy and they don't have time to say like thank you or okay or love you too or whatever it is, or that's their passive aggressive way of saying don't. But either way, right? It's like trying to balance that fear in your mind of what it is. But that's why I think open and honest conversations, like we've been saying this whole time, is so important and not being afraid to be vulnerable in what capacity that means to you and that makes you feel comfortable because vulnerability is scary. It's new. Something that gets you way out of your comfort zone. And when you're ready to be vulnerable, whoever you feel comfortable being vulnerable with, I think it really helps to change a lot of those doubts from making you feel isolated making you feel like someone else understands and gets it, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. There was something I was going to say, but I think my overthinking brain just started heating up. So, yeah, I'm just gonna say I agree.
I hate when my brain does that, right? It's like I had something in my mind and I know it was important. And it probably isn't like a lot of times to me, it's not something that's super important, but I'm like, oh, it would have been so perfect if I said that. Why didn't I say that? And I forget about it. I'm like, it bothers me for like a month and a half until I randomly remember it. And I could remember it like a year later. I don't know why my brain does that. But
Speaking of remembering, I just remembered what I was gonna say. I want to know though, like when it comes to like your fear or that concern of talking to people, is there a weird part of you that, I mean, I don't know, I feel like this kind of distracts you from the fact that you are someone who's very passionate about mental health. Is there a part of you that says to yourself, I need to do everything I can to feel important? I know we had this conversation on my podcast, I think a little bit, but I want to definitely revisit this X amount of months later. Do you feel like there's a part of you that tries, it's like, I need to do everything I can to feel important? Not in the sense, it almost feels like, I remember because I remember on my podcast, you said, would you rather be like there was like a hypothetical question where it's like, would you rather be feared or would you rather be loved? And I'm wondering if there's a part of you that's like, oh, I want to have that sense of like feeling important, so that like maybe I don't have to worry about that fear. Maybe other people could be fearful of me, which I know it's a bad thing, and I'm making it sound like Francesca's evil. But do you get what I'm saying? Where it's like the sense of like maybe you don't want to feel that because there is this sense of like I feel good because I'm having the success with inspiring my generation, or obviously with normalization, like you want to feel good. I struggle with that as well. Like I'll be like, oh, I want to feel really cool because like I got to interact with these people, but then I'm like, if I try to feel cool, what if that means I'm actually hurting people as well, or hurting friendships as well? So I don't know if that made sense, but I'm wondering like if that's something that you've had to deal with.
yes, and no. I found for me, I really have this good balance of like if something really good's happening and I feel really confident, I'll talk about it and I'll make a joke about like something like as if my ego needed a boost. Right. So I'll like make a little bit of a joke of it that I feel important, I feel really good. And maybe it minimizes it a little bit, but it kind of makes my friends laugh. So that way, if I'm having a lot of really good things happening, usually I don't have a lot of very good things happening back to back that I register in my brain is really good. Usually my brain registers more bad components. But I try to like I do like to feel important. I do like to feel like I'm doing really good and I'm super successful. But I also like to feel like people can talk to me and that they're comfortable approaching me. So it's just that balance that I love to talk about it, but then I also make that joke because I want people to know that I'm happy about it and I love it and it makes me feel really good, but I'm still I want to use the words down to earth. I don't have any reason to not be down to earth, but down to earth.
Yeah, I get where you're going with, and it's complicated too. Like I don't know, like people don't want to be around. I mean, I don't know. It's overthinking, brain heating up again. Uh, it's just so difficult because you want to remember who you are at all times. Like you want to stay alert and be like remembering like, okay, I am me. I don't need to play certain characters. I just want to be me. But how do you get that? How do you get the best version of me? That's such a difficult question that I don't think we'll ever find the answer to because I mean, it's just complicated. I don't. I wish I could study psychology. Unfortunately, I don't study it. I actually wanted to, but I heard maybe I've discussed. I've said it a lot of times on Oh My Curry Goodness, which for those who don't know, that's my podcast. If I already said that, that's just my overthinking brain. Go me. But one of the reasons why I didn't go into psychology was the feeling of in order to become a psychologist, you have to overcome your fear of spider, or you have to overcome your fears. I have a horrible fear of spiders, so that's why I never did it. But I am always interested in learning about like like people and like their stories and like what makes them them. And this feeling of like feeling important is such a difficult question because it's like you just don't want to like break into a character that becomes something that you don't align with. Like there are good people that will, whether they know it or not, become arrogant, and these are the type of people you don't want to be around with because they always think that they're better than others. But I don't know, it's weird. And that's why with your podcast and with my podcast, we emphasize the importance of human beings. And it's not a high or a low bar, it's just an important message we need to share because it's so easy to be fixated on titles and positions. And if people are using LinkedIn, we see people as connections, which is a good thing to have, but connections are not just LinkedIn connections; they're also human beings as well. And I don't know if people will ever come to that agreement, but I hope we do.
Yeah, and I think for me, something that really helps is I like to be surrounded by people who make me feel important and who want to celebrate the small things with me. And I will ask them to celebrate something because they just may not know that I want to celebrate it. And I'm always ready to celebrate them. Like, what's going on with you? What's something good that's happening? What's something not good that's happening? Let's talk about it. How can I support you? Let's celebrate you. That's huge. I try to always make my friends feel important and the people in my life feel important. And then I want to be around people who make me feel important. And if I'm around someone who's making me feel very doubtful or questioning myself or feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm constantly confused on whether or not I'm their friend, those are typically people I disconnect from because I like to feel like I am important and I like to feel like I'm surrounded by people who feel like I'm important and who I also feel are important, and we can grow and celebrate together because I like people so much, and I want to celebrate and be happy and be excited. So I try to find people that I can celebrate the good in the bond with, and I can call crying hysterically, and who will show up, but I can also call like super excited and they'll show up. So it's hard. It's hard to find that balance. I slowly learning. I'm very lucky that my best friend from when I was like 4 is still my best friend. And then my best friend from 12 is also one of my best friends. Yeah. We grew up together, so they get to see the good and the bad, and they know that I have those intrusive thoughts, and they're ready to counter them before I even speak them. But that's solely because they've been through every single moment of it. But as we're wrapping up, because we are running out of time, tell everyone how they can find your podcast.
Absolutely. So I guess like if I can plug in my personal Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram at sorry. Oh, yes, I got it. At Hamza HAMISLAM underscore 2002. That's my personal Instagram. And oh my curry goodness, you can follow that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on YouTube. And we also do have an Instagram account at the OMCG podcast where I will post clips from clips with my based on conversations with my guests. And every month I do a guest lineup where I'll say like for the month of X, here are all the interviews. Every interview is published on Thursdays. That was just some research I found when I first started the podcast that it's best to upload on Thursdays. So I decided to do that. And yeah, we're on Instagram, but stay tuned. I might be on TikTok, although I'm not ready yet. But yeah, you can definitely follow us on Instagram at the OMCG podcast.
Awesome. And I have one last question for you. Which is your favorite episode and why is it mine?
Favorite episode of my podcast?
Yeah, and why is it my episode?
Um,
Any good one?
anyone? It's very difficult to choose Okay, well, I enjoyed your conversation, our conversations, because you were very elaborative. We talked about like the enemy side of yourself. Uh, that you were very like from a podcast to podcast. I think it's so easy to say like me versus Francesca because like people care so much about analytics, but the fact is you broke it down into the fact that like a podcast is a podcast, and we just want to have a genuine conversation. So I would say Francesca's up there. If it was anyone not named Francesca, I think a lot. Okay, well, I said anyone not named Francesca. Recently, I interviewed one of my favorite soccer players of all time. Her name is Casey Fair. She is the youngest to ever compete at a FIFA World Cup. She was 16 when she competed. It was actually last year. And 1 year later, she was a guest on my podcast. Why was my favorite? Because she loves curry, and I called my podcast "Oh My Curry Goodness." And we had so much fun talking. Don't worry, Francesca. I enjoy our conversation.
Okay.
We had so much fun talking, and interestingly enough, that was an interview that I was very scared of because this is a soccer player that I really enjoyed. Like because she's Asian, she played for South Korea, so like as someone else who's Asian, there was that broad Asian connection. And I'm gonna say this publicly in case she sees it. My heart rate before our interview was at 115 beats per minute. The highest was 127 beats per minute. So in order to calm down my anxiety, I tried playing Beethoven. Not a great idea because once it got to the Fifth Symphony, I was like, all right, I need to turn this off. This is not helping. But I enjoyed our conversation, because it was just so fun learning about her story competing at a FIFA World Cup, which any soccer fan knows that like that's always a dream. So for her to compete in it was really cool to know about that, and also like what it was like to see her being a professional athlete. So Casey Fair is one of my favorite, but because Francesca technically threatened me, I will say Francesca's was my favorite interview of the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored. No, that sounds like a really cool episode. And that's the great thing about our podcast is we get to talk with so many amazing people who all have so much value in different ways in the episode that adds to the conversations that we're both so grateful to have those opportunities for.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.